Cooking is the most versatile art form and, in a way, a spiritual activity. Unlike other artistic mediums, it has the capacity to engage all senses. Chefs have long known that the presentation of a dish is as important as the taste, aroma, and texture of what is served. Hello, students. This is Chef Sunder Srinivasan from AISSMS College of Hotel Management and Catering Technology, Pune. We go ahead to the second session of Basic Methods of Cooking. In the last session, we went through the moist methods of cooking. In this session, we are going to go through the dry methods and medium of fat frying. We also will see a couple of special methods in this session. Moving ahead, what is baking? Baking is a very important method that uses dry heat, normally in an oven, or sometimes they use coal-based ovens or even hot stones. In this process, the heat is gradually transferred from the surface of the food to its center. So from outside to inside. So as the heat travels, it transforms the batter and the dough that are being baked with various textures like soft, spongy, crumbly, etc., depending on what kind of food is being baked. There is no contact of the source of heat with the food. The degree of dryness of these foods may depend on the amount of steam that is generated from the product that is being baked. So a cake would give more steam as compared to a bread. So we'll see some basic rules that are required to be understood or to be kept in mind. So always preheat the oven. The oven should not be cold when you start baking. You should always preheat the oven. The items that are to be placed, place it in the right position in the oven. So if an entire oven is used for only a single tray, so place the tray in the middle of the oven, not in the corners. The oven temperature should be set according to the product that is being baked. Do not put the product at a wrong temperature. Always use the right temperature that is prescribed. So like cakes have a lower temperature than pastries, whereas yeast-based goods like breads, they have a very hot oven, not as what required for a cake. Avoid frequent opening of the oven doors. So what happens is each time when you open door, some amount of heat loss happens. So more frequently, if doors are being opened, there will be more heat loss. The temperature within the oven would come down. So you should avoid opening the door frequently. Also, when you're opening the door, keep your face away from the door. So the hot blast of air might just come onto your face. Do not overcrowd the oven. Do not stuff the oven with a lot of products at the same time. What happens is when a lot of products go in, the temperature of the oven may drop down. Since heat gets absorbed by the food, you have to ensure the right amount of food goes inside for baking. So a right temperature, a combination of right temperature, right time will always give you a right product. So always keep that in mind. So when you put any particular food in an oven to bake, ensure that you set the right temperature, you keep it for the right time inside, your product will always come out good. Moving ahead, the next dry method we see is broiling. So what is broiling? This cooking is done by direct heat and used synonymously with grilling. So some products that are done on bars also are broiled. Now in this particular method, there is no liquid used. There is no liquid at all. So it could be done with a source of heat from above or below. So it could be from above, the heat could be given from above or from below as well. Now what happens here, it can be done on a grid of iron bars or in a pan also, where the pan is placed entirely into an oven. The food is generally uncovered when it is being cooked. The pan or the grill, they need to be slightly oiled to avoid the sticking of the food to these particular surfaces. And this method also, food cooks pretty fast. They're pretty fast in this method. So this is broiling. Then we move ahead to frying. So what is frying? It is where the food is immersed in oil or fat at a sufficiently high temperature. The temperature plays an important part. Now generally in frying, it is used to brown the surface, partially or completely cook the food from inside as well. As we saw earlier in our earlier video, that frying is further bifurcated into deep fat frying and shallow fat frying. So we'll just go into the next version in a couple of in a minute. So what happens when you fry? It adds good crunchy texture to the food, and also gives good flavor to bland and tender foods. So bland foods can be given good flavor by using this particular method. There are two types of frying, as we just said, deep and shallow. So what is deep frying? So in this particular method, the food is completely immersed or submerged in hot oil or fat, and the typical temperature ranges between 175 degrees centigrade to 190 degrees centigrade. This is a very, very popular method of cooking seen in India. Right across our streets, you would find a lot of products being deep fried. So some popular deep fried foods are, the bhajia, the batata vada, samosa, then you have the sabudana vada, medu vada, then you have these smileys that we get, then you have some potato croquets, you have the chips, and there are many more that are deep fried. Then we'll see some basic rules that are being followed. Ensure you have the right equipment to be used for deep frying. Ensure it has a deep case into it. It should not be shallow at all. Then the fat or oil should have a high smoke point. Now, what is smoke point? It is the temperature at which the oil will start to smoke. So that is the apt temperature for frying of food. Always ensure that it has reached the smoke point. Many people put a small piece of food into the oil to check whether the oil has reached its right temperature or not. Many foods require binding or coating before you fry. For example, I've given over here a batata vada. Now, batata vada, the potato mixture cannot be directly put into oil. It has to be coated with a batter to prevent disintegration of the products, the ingredients that are there inside. Whereas the photo on the right down, that is the sabudana vada, the entire thing is bound together using potato. Now here, if the temperature of oil is low, the product will disintegrate. If it is right, the entire product will hold itself. Similarly, the left bottom figure of croquets, same thing, it has to be coated. It is coated with egg and breadcrumbs, which holds the entire mix within itself. So it is important that you have a binding or a coating agent for many of the fried products. Do not overload the product into oil. Don't put excess products into the oil. What happens again? The temperature of oil will drop down. The moment oil temperature drops down, the food might start to disintegrate, or the product might soak up or drink up some oil while being fried. So avoid overloading of food. Drain the food well after you deep fry. Use kitchen paper and neatly arrange these products immediately after frying so that the excess oil is absorbed by the paper. Ensure the food is not wet before frying. So what happens if the food is wet or if there is a lot of moisture present in the food? The moment you put it in hot oil, the oil will start to splutter. It might just come off the equipment and it might splutter onto your hand or face. So you must be careful. You should avoid wet foods. Pat them dry and then you deep fry these products. After your frying process is done, you strain this oil properly. You can pass it to a strainer or a muslin cloth, and then you store it in a cool place until you want to reuse it. We move ahead to shallow frying. In this method, food is either partially cooked or it can be completely cooked, but the food is not completely submerged in oil. It is partially submerged in oil. Tender foods, good quality items like meat, fish, poultry, various other mixtures, they are bound together and they are used in this particular method. As this method completes the cooking of the dish, entire process is complete over here. Now it is important that apart from the earlier rules that we saw for deep fat frying, those rules do apply even for shallow fat frying. Here, the presentation side is put at the base. So that side goes down in the shallow frying first, and then it is turned over. So you have to ensure that it is browned evenly, and the side that goes on first is generally known as the presentation side. So let's see a couple of popular shallow fried products. So you have the chicken breast cutlets, and you have the aloo tikki, which is very, very popular. Then you have the meat cutlets, and you have parathas. These are also shallow fried. In many or different types of parathas are shallow fried. We will now see a video to understand the science of frying.
Whether it's donuts, french fries, chicken, or Oreos, fried food is everywhere, and it's delicious. I mean, isn't that why we all go to fairs? Besides making our taste buds happy, deep fried foods also involve some really cool chemistry, from the cooking process itself to the kind of oil and batter you're using. When you submerge a piece of food into really hot oil, a bunch of chemical reactions start happening, cooking your food and giving it that crisp outer layer. Typically, you'll want the temperature of the oil to be around 180 degrees Celsius, but that varies depending on the recipe. You'll know the oil is hot enough when you drop some food in and it starts bubbling. Now, some people might think that that's the oil boiling, but it's not. It's actually moisture boiling off the surface of the food, since the oil's temperature is nearly twice the boiling point of water. As the water leaves the food, two things are happening. First, the food's surface dehydrates and a crispy crust begins to form. But also, the escaping water molecules leave gaps that let oil molecules enter the food, which is what researchers call the oil uptake. In fact, some studies have shown that the amount of oil uptake is directly proportional to the amount of water that's lost. More oil increases the food's fat content, and therefore its energy content, also known as the calories. And if too much oil gets absorbed, you might be left with a greasy mess of a meal. But you don't want to take your food out of the oil too soon either. Otherwise, the outside won't be hot enough for long enough to cook it all the way through. That's because cooking is all about heat transfer. When food is in a deep fryer, the outside layer of molecules is heated up thanks to convection, from the currents of hot oil flowing around. Then all of those food molecules start bumping into each other and transferring heat energy. So the inside is heated because of conduction. So those are the basics of deep frying food. But there's a lot more that goes into making a tasty corn dog. Like, what happens when you add batter or a breading to the outside of your soon-to-be fried food? Well, batter is basically an extra layer between the food and the hot oil. So the batter is mostly what's getting dehydrated. All that heat transfer is still happening, only this way, the food at the center holds on to more moisture and doesn't get too dry. As fish and chips, fried chicken, and tempura lovers will know, a little batter can also let you add more flavor to the food and give it a crunchy, textured crust. You can even add beer to your batter to make the crust softer and crispier. That's because the carbon dioxide in beer forms bubbles that fluff up the batter, and foaming agents, which are certain proteins found in beer, keep those bubbles from bursting as fast as they normally would. Plus, the ethanol in beer evaporates faster than water, because alcohol molecules aren't as strongly attracted to each other as water molecules are. This means the batter will dry out faster, so the food doesn't have to be in the fryer as long to get a crispy crust. But one study did show that beer batters do have more oil uptake than water-based rice or wheat batters, so calorie counters be warned. You might also have heard that some oils are better to use than others when frying food. Different oils are made up of different kinds of fat molecules, or lipids, and have different nutritional benefits. They can also affect the flavor of your food because they break down differently. See, every oil has something called a smoke point, a temperature where it starts to create smoke, which can give the food a bad taste. Basically, the heat causes the lipids in the oil to break down and produce some volatile compounds, which are chemicals that easily can become gases. Some of these leave the oil and enter the nearby atmosphere as smoke, but others can enter the food and change its flavor. Corn oil, for example, is made up of lipids with lots of double bonds, also known as polyunsaturated fats, and it tends to break down more easily at lower temperatures. That's because polyunsaturated fats have some weak carbon-hydrogen bonds, which break and set off a chain of chemical reactions that eventually produce volatile compounds. So when you're deep frying something, you'll probably want to look for an oil that has a high smoke point, and most vegetable oils fit that bill. Deep frying food is a lot more scientific than you'd expect. You have to apply all kinds of knowledge about heat transfer and fat content so that your food is actually edible. So treat this as some food for thought the next time you're eating some delicious hot French fries.
So we see another method called as sauteing. Sauteing comes under shallow frying. It literally means to jump in French. So various food items, they are cut into small or thin pieces, and then they are put into a pan with a little bit of oil, and then they are tossed frequently. So a little bit of fat is used, and this completely pan is shaken time and again, and these are flipped occasionally. Now this can be either applicable for many products where slow cooking is required. So it is just tossed and then left aside, and then again it is tossed and served. So this is sauteing. Then this is a very popular method, stir fry. Okay. Now the food ingredients are fried in small amount of hot oil while being stirred in a wok. Wok is the equipment that is used to toss these vegetables. Now, this technique originated in China, and in the recent centuries it has spread all across the world, basically, not only Asia and West, but all across the world. The food is cut into small pieces, thin strips, or fine chopped. This enables the food to cook faster. Microwave cooking. Although it is a form of energy, it is not heat. Okay, the principle of microwave involves electronic heating and is concerned with the production of high frequency waves from an oscillator tube called magnetron. Now, what happens in a microwave basically is, imagine you rub your palms. You rub your palms together and rub it at very high speed. You will feel that heat is being generated. Now imagine if your hand is rubbing 500 times faster than what you actually can, what would happen? Immense amount of heat would be generated, and this heat results in cooking of food. That is what exactly microwave does. So the water molecules present in the food, they oscillate at a very high speed, and these generate friction, and this friction results in cooking of the food. We will now see a video that explains the details about microwave cooking.
Whether you love them or hate them, there's no denying microwave ovens are super convenient. They can heat food like this much more quickly than a conventional oven, although not always with the same results. But how do they work, right? Yeah, microwaves. Sure, microwaves, great. But what the heck are those? That's a good question. Microwaves are a type of wave on the electromagnetic spectrum, and they're kind of sandwiched between radio waves and infrared radiation. In the case of microwave ovens, the most common wave frequency is roughly 2,450 megahertz. Waves in this frequency range have an interesting property. They're absorbed by water, fats, and sugars. And once they're absorbed, they're converted directly into atomic motion, heat. These waves have another convenient property though. They are not absorbed by most plastics, glass, or ceramics. Metal, however, does reflect microwaves, which is why it's a bad idea to leave a spoon in your cheese dip when the microwave oven's on. Not that any of us have done that. You'll often hear people say microwave ovens cook from the inside out, right? That's the key to the speed. Well, think about it like this. Let's say you're baking a cake in a conventional oven. Normally you'd bake this at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or so, but this time you accidentally set that bad boy for 600 degrees Fahrenheit. The outside of the cake is gonna burn before the inside even gets warm, and you will have ruined somebody's birthday. In a conventional oven, the heat has to migrate by conduction from the outside of the food toward the middle. Hot, dry air on the outside evaporates moisture, so the outside can be crispy and brown, like the crust on bread, while the inside is still moist. In microwave cooking, though, the radio waves penetrate the food and excite the water and fat molecules more or less evenly throughout. No heat has to migrate toward the interior by conduction. There's heat everywhere, all at once, because the molecules are all excited together. There are limits, though. Microwaves penetrate unevenly in thick pieces of food. That means they don't make it all the way to the middle, basically. And there are also hot spots caused by wave interference, but you get the idea. The heating process is different because you are exciting atoms rather than conducting heat. Inside a microwave oven, the air is at room temperature, so there's no way to form a crust. That's why microwavable pastries, or Hot Pockets, sometimes come with this little sleeve thing made out of foil and cardboard. The sleeve reacts to the microwave energy by becoming very hot. This exterior heat lets the crust become as crispy as it would in a conventional oven.
Now, we'll go to the next one is infrared cooking. It's very similar to a microwave. Again, wavelength is important over here, but only thing, electromagnetic energy that is used. This is a light form of energy, and it is generated from the source, and it goes ahead. As it goes ahead, whatever food is placed in its path gets cooked. So radiation that passes in form of infrared rays from the source cooks the food. So we have to keep in mind that small tender bits of food gets cooked over. You cannot cook large pieces of food over here. So as example, if you see this photo of a shawarma being cooked, so only the surface meat, only a little bit of meat will be cooking at a given time, and then as and when it is cooked, it is kept on scraped off, it is removed, and then the next layer starts to cook. So this is infrared cooking. Let's do a quick recap of what we saw in today's session. We saw under dry method, baking and broiling. Under the medium of fat, we saw frying, which is bifurcated into deep fat frying and shallow frying. We also saw stir fry method and sauteing method of cooking. And we saw a couple of special methods, that is microwave cooking and infrared cooking. So with this, we come to end of this particular session. Students of AI SSMS College of Hotel Management and Catering Technology need to click on the link given in the description and attempt the quiz. So thank you all students. Happy learning.